أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. So we're continuing to deal with issues that come up in the prayer. In this section in the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani that is called the general, or the chapter that deals with general issues of the prayer. That deals with all of the major issues of the prayer. And we have been talking about when you forget in the prayer, and now we're coming to a particular category of person who forgets a lot, who's called the mustankih.
قال المصنف رحمه الله ومن استنكحه الشك في السهو فليلهى عنه ولا إصلاح عليه.
Somebody who has this quality of istinkah, which in Arabic is another word that means kathra, which means a lot, something happening regularly to this person. And what happens to him regularly? Shak, doubt. What do we mean by doubt? We mean that when he comes into the prayer and he's engaged in praying, he is unsure come the end of the prayer as to what he has done in the prayer so far. Has he done 3 rak'ats or has he done 4? He is unsure. He cannot be positive that he's done 4. He cannot be positive he's done 3. He doesn't know which of them that he's done. This is shak, doubt. Now, somebody who has this quality of doubt frequently, what do we mean by frequently? What do we mean by frequently? Now, there's different positions about this, but the one chosen by An-Nafrawi, who is the person who has a commentary on the Risala, is that it means when doubt happens to a person one day, and then maybe not the next, but then the day after that. He says it's enough if it happens every other day. Or the stronger position is that it happens to him at least once a day. This is the strongest position. And you know this, when you pray on your own, or as an imam, because when you are praying behind the imam is the one who takes these things on. When you pray on your own or as an imam, how frequently do you have doubts about how many rak'ats you've prayed? Or whether you've missed out some part of your prayer, such as a ruku or a sajda or something of that nature. How frequently do these doubts occur to you? You know that from your own experience. If it happens to you almost all the time, then these are whisperings from shaitan. And shaitan is simply trying to make your deen hard for you and make you feel badly towards the prayer, because you always have to add something to it all the time, because you're not sure about how much of your prayer you've done. So if this happens all the time, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have told us that there is la haraja fi deen, no difficulty in the deen, the fuqaha have said that such a person ignores those whisperings. And unlike the person who gets this doubt irregularly, once in a blue moon, and as we said before, that person builds upon that which he is certain, which is 3 rak'ats. This person does not build on anything. He simply assumes that he's completed the 4. He just disregards it. And he does not have to make up the rak'at that he thinks maybe there's a chance that he missed. But this does not mean that he does not have to do a sajda. This does not mean that he does not have to do a sajda. He doesn't make up an extra rak'at, but he still, after he says assalamu alaikum, does the sajda, because the fuqaha say it's closer to being addition than deficiency, because in his case there is no building on certainty. What he is uncertain of is considered to be the base, in other words, 4. So the doubt and anything else that is in the prayer is more akin to it being more than it being less. So in such a person's case, he comes to the end of his prayer, he says, was it 3 or 4? I don't know. Assalamu alaikum, and then he does 2 sajdas. After the salam. I mean, as we mentioned before, the one who adds a rakat as well also does it after the salam, because he has definitely added something to his prayer, because he has said assalamu alaikum before. He has added an additional salam, the one who it happens to very infrequently. But in this case, he is considered to be in the same boat, and he does also his sajda after the salam.
وهو الذي يكثر ذلك منه يشك كثيرا أن يكون سهى زاد أو نقص ولا يوقن فليسجد بعد السلام فقط.
So he reiterates it here in order for us to be certain about this ruling. He explains to him, so we have said about this one, this istankah, this person who has istinkah. What is it? He says he is the one who this happens to incredibly frequently. And again we said that means once a day in the strongest position, as a minimum. Yashukku kathiran. He has plenty of doubts, and his doubts can be of different types. He doesn't know whether he's added or taken away from his prayer, or missed out this or added that. It can be of any form. If it happens to him frequently, he disregards it totally. If it happens to him frequently, he disregards his doubts completely. Regardless of whether his doubt was whether he's done too many or too little, or whatever nature it is. And he reiterates, his sajda is after the salam, regardless.
وإذا أيقن بالسهو سجد بعد إصلاح صلاته.
Now we come to a new category. We've been talking about people who have doubts. You come to the end of your prayer, you don't know whether you've done 3 or 4, so you add an extra one, and then you do your sajda after the salam, if it happens to you only sometimes. If it happens to you all the time, then you simply say assalamu alaikum and do your sajdas. This is the person who doubts, he doesn't know. But now we have another category. Somebody who comes to the end of his prayer. And just when he's in his final tashahhud, he realizes that he's missed something out in his prayer. He remembers, I didn't do a ruku' in this rakat. He knows for a fact that he hasn't done it. إِذَا أَيْقَنَ بِالسَّهْوِ. What does he do?
سجد بعد إصلاح صلاته.
He puts right his prayer. He hasn't said assalamu alaikum yet. He remembers while he's in the tashahhud. What does he do? As soon as he remembers, he goes back and he puts right his prayer. If he has missed a ruku' in that rakat, then he gets up to the standing position and goes into ruku' from the standing position, and then goes back to his tashahhud after that. If this ruku' that he missed was in the second or the first or the third rak'at, then he has to add another complete rak'at, because that rak'at was invalid. So he puts right his prayer by adding a new rak'at, then comes back to the end of his prayer and does the tashahhud. And in all of these cases, he does his sajda after putting it right, but again after the salam, because he definitely has only added. There's nothing deficient in his prayer because he's had an opportunity to put it right. If he's put his prayer right, then there's nothing lacking in it. So there's no cause for him to do a sajda before the salam. So he does his sajda after putting it right and after saying the salam at the end.
فإن كثر ذلك منه فهو يعتريه كثيرا أصلح صلاته ولم يسجد لسهوه.
Okay, so now we have another type of mustankih, the person who has things happen to him frequently. A person who has these things happen to him frequently. In this case, this person frequently comes to the end of his prayer and realizes he's missed something. So, say once a day he misses something in his prayer, but he always remembers by the end of the prayer. What does this person do?
He doesn't do anything.
No, because he knows he's missed something. If you know you've missed something, then you have to put it right. You can't complete your prayer knowing your prayer is deficient.
But without sajda.
This is not doubt. He knows that he's missed something from his prayer. So he has to put it right, the same as the one who it happens to only sometimes. But in this case, he doesn't do sajda. So we have 4 categories really. The one who doubts in his prayer, but it only happens to him sometimes. What does he do? He puts it right and does sajda after the salam. All of it's after the salam. The one who has doubts, but it happens to him all the time. What does he do? He doesn't put anything right, but he does do sajda. Then the one who knows he's missed something, and it only happens to him sometimes. What does he do? He puts it right and then does sajda. And then the one who knows he's missed something, but it happens to him all the time, he only puts it right and there's no sajdas. Because it happens so frequently, it's to avoid it being an imposition on that person. That's why we have these rulings about the mustankih. If the mustankih, the one who happens to all the time, disregards this and does the sajdas anyway, it doesn't invalidate his prayer. Or if he disregards it in the first instance and adds a rakat anyway, just so he can be on the safe side, again it doesn't invalidate his prayer, but he has done the worst of the two options. He should take the ease that the Sharia allows him. Otherwise it is being extreme in your deen.
ومن قام من اثنتين رجع ما لم يفارق الأرض بيديه وركبتيه.
Now we have another issue, which is whether you can go back to a sunnah from a fard or not. And in what instance can you go back to a sunnah? Because the tashahhud in the middle of your prayer, if you're doing maghrib or you're doing dhuhr or you're doing isha or you're doing asr, the ones that have more than 2 rakats, the middle sitting, when you do the tashahhud, if you miss that middle sitting and you are in sajda and then instead of going into the sitting position you start to stand, what do?
Come back down.
Come back.
You can come back down only if some part of your body is still in contact with the ground. If all of your body has left the ground, then you cannot come back.
Your knees and your hand.
Your knees and your hands. Your knees and your hands. So there's 4 parts of your body apart from your head, obviously, which obviously has started to come up even if you're sitting. We're talking about your hands and your knees. If one hand or one knee is still in contact with the ground, you can come back. If they have all left the ground, then you cannot come back. If you do come back, your prayer is valid. However, they do say it hasn't invalidated your prayer. But you have done something which is incorrect in the deen. If your hand's still touching and you realize you're almost standing and then you realize when your hand is still touching and you don't go back down, your prayer is invalid as well. If you remember in time, you have to go back.
Invalid.
If you remember in time, before your hand has left the ground or your knee has left the ground, and you do not go back, you are deliberately ignoring one of the sunnahs of the prayer. A sunnah that is mu'akkad, that is emphasized. And the deliberate disregard for the sunnah of the prayer, if they are mu'akkad, if they are emphasized, is enough to invalidate your prayer. So we have the instance where your hands are still touching and you remember, you must go back. Your hands have left the ground and your knees have left the ground, you must continue and go up. And then, because you have missed out something, when you come to the end of your prayer, after you have finished your final tashahhud, you say you do your sajdas, your 2 sajdas, before saying Assalamu alaikum.
فإذا فارقها تمادى ولم يرجع وسجد قبل السلام.
If you have left the ground, you continue to rise and do not go back and do your sajdas before the salam. So he's reiterating that there.
ومن ذكر صلاة صلاها متى ما ذكرها على نحو ما فاتته.
Okay, so we finished this thing about making things right within the prayer. Now we're going on to a different topic, which is when you have missed out entire prayers, not just elements from the prayer, but you have forgotten a whole prayer. For example, you left out dhuhr from yesterday, and then you come to today, and then you remember dhuhr. When do you have to pray that dhuhr that you missed out yesterday? He says, when you remember a prayer, you pray it as soon as you remember it. It is incumbent upon you to make up that prayer as soon as you remember, even if you are in a time when it is forbidden to pray, such as at the time of sunset, while the sun is in the process of going down below the horizon. In other words, the orb of the sun is slowly descending. It is only permitted to pray once it is completely gone below the horizon, or when the sun is rising. As it is still touching the horizon, until it has left the horizon, it is forbidden to pray, except when you are making up a prayer that you have remembered. This is the only time that it is permissible, or indeed you must make it up. Even if the imam is giving the khutbah, you remember that you haven't prayed subh, you must do it then and there. The only time when you should take some note is if you are somebody who is recognized as a person of knowledge in that community. If you stand up and do it there, people might get the wrong impression that it is permissible to pray in that circumstance. So you should get up, leave, do it where people are not watching you, and then come back in that case. But everybody else should get up and do it then and there. If you have forgotten a prayer, you must do it as soon as you remember it. على نحو ما فاتته. Have you read that bit? In the form that you forgot it. So, you missed out dhuhr, but you were traveling at that time when that dhuhr was made obligatory on you. When you come to make it up, do you make it up as 4 or do you make it up as 2? 2. Yes. Or if you are traveling now and you remember a prayer that you should have prayed when you were at home the previous day, do you do it as 4 or a 2?
4.
No, you do it as 4. Because when you forgot it, you were resident. So you do it in the form that it should have been prayed when you were there. Similarly, if you forget subh, and you remember when you wake up, when you do your subh, you should do it with the same long recitation, the same out loud nature, and with the qunut and the other bits which are mustahab within it in exactly the same form. What about if you were very ill when you forgot these prayers and you could only pray at that time sitting down or lying down? When you come to make up the prayer, how should you make it up?
Normal.
Normally, yes. That's the only exception to this rule. Similarly, if you remember a prayer when you were well, you missed a prayer, then you remember when you were sick and you can only sit. You do it in the way that you are able to, yes. So when he says ala nahwi ma fatatu, he means what we were talking about in the first instance, not what we were talking about in terms of health or lack of health. ثم
أعاد ما كان في وقته مما صلى بعدها.
Okay, this is an issue that a lot of people have confusion about. This is an issue about which a lot of people have confusion. So, let's give you an example of this. You remember subh, say at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, after you have prayed dhuhr. What do? You pray subh. This is the position that he's talking about here is slightly different to what we talked about before. Because there's 2 positions within the madhab. Ibn al-Qasim says, and that's it. But the other position in the madhab, which Ibn Abi Zayd al-Khairawani says is the stronger one, considers to be the stronger one, is that you do subh and then you repeat the dhuhr. So you can make sure that the subh and the dhuhr are in the same order. And this applies if the number of prayers you have missed is 5 or less.
Even if you already prayed the dhuhr, because you said at 3
Yes,
o'clock.
even this is if you have prayed dhuhr already.
Yeah,
And then remember after praying dhuhr.
yeah.
And then so you do your subh, you repeat the dhuhr if you are still within the time of dhuhr. If you remember after the time of dhuhr is finished, you only do the subh.
If you remember after you've prayed Maghrib, and then do you have to do?
No, you only do you only repeat the prayer according to this position, whose time you are in. So if you remember the subh after Maghrib, having prayed Maghrib, what do? Subh and then Maghrib. You don't do the dhuhr and the asr because their time is done. If you remember the subh after the next subh, then obviously you're doing the same prayer again, but you have to intend one as being the fa'ita and one as being the current one. You understand? So it doesn't mean that you have to repeat all the 5 prayers that are between you and that prayer. No, only the one whose time is current. And this only applies if the number of prayers you have missed is 5 or less. If you have missed loads of prayers, like you sort of became a bit lax in the deen and left a year of prayers, and you want to make them up. When you come to start making these prayers up, you don't repeat the prayers that you've already prayed in their time, because the current prayers take precedence over the old prayers. Whereas when it's only a few prayers, the old prayers take precedence over the new prayer. So, if you come to the, for example, you missed Dhuhr, and you remember Dhuhr, you remember the fact that you've missed Dhuhr right at the end of the time of Isha, say at the end of the night, and you still haven't prayed Isha. If you pray your Dhuhr, you are going to miss the time of Isha completely, and the time of Subh will start. So what do?
I think you pray Isha
No.
before you miss it.
No, you pray Dhuhr even though you are going to completely miss the time of Isha. If there is 5 or less prayers that you have missed. If it is more than that, then you pray Isha first. Understand? Anyway, we'll leave it there. Inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow in this same topic. Any questions before we finish?
You have a question? If you stand up after doing only one sajda, is the same rule that you have to come back only when you have one of your knees or your hands touching the floor?
No, it's a fard. Come back.
The fard you come back.
Come back straight away. It's only for sunnah that you can't come back. You have to go back. And if you have to come back for the second sajda, you have to come back to a sitting position first, and then go into sajda. Because that's how you make right that rakat. You have to go back to complete the sunnah, otherwise that entire rakat becomes invalid. And if you deliberately make it invalid, your prayer is invalid, if you had a chance to put it right and you neglected to do so. بسر وبركاته بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين